So the topic is microbiota and the immune system. And if you're not familiar with the philosophy of Sri Anandamurti, some of the things I will say might be a little bit confusing, but I don't have time to explain everything in just this short while. Okay, let's get to it. All right, so there are three categories of microbiota, and there's the crude category, the intermediate, and the subtle. The crude ones, they exist in physical space, but they're very, very small, and billions of them, or millions, billions, exist in a single carbon atom. And since you have trillions of carbon atoms in your body, you really have a lot of microbiota inside of your body. The crude ones, they travel on mantras, and they're subtle enough to move beyond the speed of light. They can spread diseases throughout the galaxy, throughout the universe, and they're not limited by any speed or inhibited by any distance or objects that get in the way. The intermediate type of microbiota, they occupy psychic space. They travel on psychic or psychophysical waves. We're not going to talk about them much because they're not so related to the immune system. But they are related to the formation of diseases in the following way. If the culture or the human society encourages imperialistic mentality or negative types of mentality, or crude thinking, which, if you study the history of human society, has always been, the choice of most people, of most cultures. That's going to invite diseases to human society. If you study the history of pandemics, it's sort of like nonstop. It's not, COVID virus is nothing unique or nothing new that we're facing. It's been on and on and on and on. The first known pandemic was in Mesopotamia at 1200 BC. In 430 BC, there was a plague in Athens that killed 90,000 people in the city. I mean, that's a huge percentage of the city. That would be like, 60% of the population. And when you look at the history, every 100 years, every 50 years, there's some other huge pandemic that's killing very huge percentages of the population. This coronavirus is really gentle. We should count ourselves lucky. But so long as a society collectively, our dominant socioeconomic approach to life is materialistic, is greedy, is based on getting what yeah.
Excuse me, I really apologize to interrupt you. There is some people, they couldn't really able to hear you so well. Do you mind to
What? There's a microphone here.
louder? Or
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's cool. All right, I'll just talk louder. Hooking up the microphone is difficult.
Or maybe you could be closer to your device if you're using the
preferences. Hold on. Sound. Input volume. Okay, is it better now?
Yes, a lot better. Thank you so much, Dada. Please.
You're welcome. The microphone was turned down.
Okay.
So anyway, the diseases in these pandemics, they're not coming randomly to the society. We are the creators of these pandemics, through the mentalities and the things which we promote through our actions and our thoughts. The subtle type of microvita occupies suprapsychic space between ectoplasm and pure eye feeling. And there's not much we can say about this subtle type of microvita because Anandamurti Ji, he didn't talk about them very much. They're emanated by Prampurusa. They have subtle effects and help us in the spiritual sphere. And aside from these three broad categories, within each category, there are positive microvita, neutral microvita, and negative microvita. Positive microvita are pro-consciousness, negative microvita are pro-matter. So microvita, they're the root cause of life in the universe. And when a microvita is dormant, they're in the atom or they're floating around, they're incredibly small, smaller than any subatomic particle that has yet to be discovered. And they are so small that we will never be able to detect them with scientific equipment. They're too small for that. We cannot even detect an electron with scientific equipment, let alone a microvita. They're too small. You have to use our mind to understand that they're there as a result of experiments that we're doing. But microvita are not inert matter. They have life inside of them. That's why it's called microvita. And when they awaken, they can take on a different structure. So a tiny microvitum can change and become so large that it can be seen through a microscope. This little microvitum, when it awakens, it has the capacity to organize the physical matter and create a structure for itself. If the environment is changed, the microvita can change to suit that environment. And so in the lecture I gave in the sectoral conference, maybe it was last week or something. No, was it sectoral? The retreat you had, I don't know what you called it, I'm sorry. What I was saying is that the DNA you have inside of you is awakened microvita. It's a sequence of awakened microvita. And they're providing the code that teaches the cell how to make the proteins that it needs. And not only that, right? It's not just enough to have a genetic code. You have to know how to use the genetic code. So a lot of the genome is called non-coding DNA. And this non-coding DNA is not useless. In fact, it's more important than the actual genes. A gene is a coding DNA. Having the instructions how to make a protein isn't much use unless you know when to make that protein, how to make that protein, how to combine that protein with other proteins to form the structures that the cell needs. And still, that's not enough for the cell to function. Right? It's not enough just to have the proteins you need. These proteins have to become active. They have to work. They have to be coordinated. And all that is done by your prana. The prana is controlled by the mind. And the mind is composed of ectoplasm. The ectoplasm is controlled by the intermediate form of DNA. So the crude form of DNA takes the intermediate form of microvita. So the crude form of microvita is forming the DNA structures, manifesting itself as the proteins, and then the cell is using that. But the intermediate microvita is the operating system that's coded into the ectoplasms of the cell. And so this is the subtle aspects of life that's happening behind the macroscopic things which we can see going on inside of a microscope. So last time we talked about evolution. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up here will become apparent soon. What is the relationship between evolution and the immune system? Baba says, if I say Baba, I mean Anandamurti or P.R. Sarkar, forgive me. Of the three types of microvita, the crude type are instrumental in emanating life throughout the cosmos. They create a stir within the physical structure. When it says that in the physical structure, means the structure is not alive, right? In the subsequent stages, through clash and cohesion, enormous changes take place in the physical structure. This process led to the emergence of the dinosaurs, mammals, and finally intelligent human beings. So microvita were the root cause of life, but they're also responsible for the evolution of life into different forms. And the topic of my lecture last time was to explain that, how that happens. And I'll just summarize it in this one sentence here. There is this, if the collective body of a particular species does not like their instinctual expressions, that they're within the environment that they live in, then the individual cannot do anything. They can struggle a little bit. The deer can try to run a little faster, the horse can try to jump a little higher, but they're limited by their genetic structure. However, if the collective body is dissatisfied, then they have a self-controlling faculty, and this can lead to the metamorphosis of the species in subsequent generations. Not gradually. It can happen in one generation or 2 generations. It could happen over many generations. But it's specifically not a random process of mutation that's leading towards evolution. As a result of this metamorphosis, their longings change, means their ectoplasmic structure changes, their physical structure changes, their hormones change. It's an all-around change, and it has to happen simultaneously. You can't just get one piece at a time. Otherwise, that species is not going to survive in the environment. Okay, so what's the role of microvita in all this? Well, the collective structure, the self-controlling faculty creating this urge for change, that's expressed through the chakras, right? Now, somehow that new genetic material has to come. Somehow those new ectoplasmic structures have to enter. So this requires the functioning of crude microvita and intermediate microvita. Now, evolutionary change doesn't always require new DNA. In fact, usually it doesn't. It requires that the existing DNA is reorganized and used in a different way, right? There's very little difference between the genetic genome in a person versus a monkey, or even versus a mouse. But the way we use this DNA is vastly different. Human beings have not very many genes. However, we have a vastly greater amount of proteins that we're synthesizing from those genes than any other species, because our body is the most subtle. Our body has the most variety of cells. These cells are doing the most variety of things. So we are using our DNA in a much more complicated way. So anyway, you have this DNA, and remember, DNA is a sequence of awakened microvita. They reorganize themselves. Sometimes they duplicate sections of their own DNA because that needs to be emphasized more. For example, we can digest carbohydrates much better than monkeys because we have more of the genome to digest carbohydrates. This is very important for people. Once you can digest carbohydrates better, means you can store calories. You don't have to spend all day eating, such as the cow has to do. You have a lot more free time to do other things, like use your mind. We just have to eat a few times a day. But if the genetic change does require new DNA, for example, the horse wants to become a giraffe, where does that new DNA come from? A positive microvita carrying the information of how to make the genetic change is going to come. It's going to be attracted by that collective urge. And once it enters the structure, it's going to metamorphose. It's going to awaken and take the form of something called a retrovirus. All right, so what is a virus? Baba says here, when a microbiome has been awakened and enters a cell, a virus adapts to the environment of the cell. So a virus is an awakened microvita. You get a virus when a microbiome has entered the cell and developed. The RNA and DNA of a particular virus is unique to that virus. Particles of cosmic chitta, when microvita are emanated from the cosmic mind, so the microvita are the instruments which the cosmic mind uses to take the information stored in the cosmic chitta and disseminate it throughout the universe into the different species to allow them to create different living structures. So yeah, so the microvita contain, right, the information that's in the RNA and DNA. The information is there, but you can't see it until the microvita is awakened, right? When you say you can't see it, when it takes the form of DNA, you can see the information, right? It's already there in the microvita, but when it awakens, then okay, there the scientists can see that DNA is there. That's the information. So viruses are carrying genetic information in them. Well, Baba says virus is a bad term. Virus means snake venom. right, in Old English. But that's not a good term because it implies that virus is only something negative. Of course, so far in science, we've only discovered negative viruses because you don't go to the doctor when you're feeling good. You don't say, oh, doctor, I feel very good today. Maybe I have some virus attacking my body. So they don't look to see that there's positive viruses, but there are. Now, viruses are not easy to find. Viruses are incredibly small. You can fit over 1 million viruses inside of a single cell. They're very, very tiny little entities. But for the sake of this lecture, so that we're not confused, I'll use the word virus or positive virus. And when I say positive virus, I mean a positive awakened microvita. So a positive awakened microvita will help a species to evolve. A negative virus is caused by a negative microvita, which is awakened, and that's a pathogen. It has a negative effect. A retrovirus is a special type of virus. The HIV virus, which causes the AIDS disease, is a retrovirus. A retrovirus, well, first I'll explain what a normal virus does. A normal virus enters the cell and uses the cell's own molecular machinery to reproduce itself. And you might ask, why would a cell be designed to help the virus to reproduce itself? The reason is because this is necessary for life to happen because most viruses are positive. And so the cell is programmed to help these viruses because it's beneficial for the species. But a negative virus can also do it. So when a virus goes into a cell, the virus contains either RNA or DNA, and the cell every cell has the ability to reproduce RNA and DNA. It needs to do this to make the proteins. When a cell makes a protein, it copies the DNA to RNA, copies that RNA, uses that RNA to make the proteins. So when the virus goes in the cell, right, the cell takes the virus's DNA or the virus's RNA, uses that RNA to make the proteins that the virus needs to make more viruses. Then the cell assembles those parts together and creates the new viruses for the virus. And then those viruses escape from the cell. So that's a typical virus. A retrovirus is slightly different. A retrovirus not only uses the cell's machinery to make more viruses, it adds one step. It takes its own DNA and implants its own DNA into the cell's DNA. So now the cell has more DNA, right? Its retroviral DNA has been implanted in the cell's DNA. So the cell's genes have changed. So when the cell will reproduce, it now contains extra DNA that wasn't there before. That DNA has become part of the new cell, right? Now, then the cell takes that DNA and produces more viruses from it. And so when the retrovirus implants the DNA into the cell, now when that cell divides and makes a new cell, that new cell now can also produce that virus. So this is called a retrovirus. If this new DNA from the retrovirus enters the reproductive cells, the egg or the sperms, then that new DNA is going to pass on to the next generation. It's going to become part of the species. So in this way, a retrovirus can transform a species to a new species by inserting new DNA. So this we know. We know that 8% of the human genome is composed of retroviruses. They're called endogenous retroviruses because they're not coming from outside. They're retroviruses that are part of our genes. They're always there. And they can do certain things, like they can reproduce themselves and move themselves around the DNA. They display a certain amount of independence. Now, this independence within the genome is not unique to retroviruses. 45% of the gene of people, almost half, is composed of something called transposable elements. They're called jumping genes. These are genes that can move around in the DNA. They can reproduce themselves. They can be very tricky. And they display a certain amount of independence as if, they have their own plan, as if they're a unique, independent life form, because they are. Each of them is an expression of a particular independent microvita that have coordinated their processes into a coherent chromosome. But a lot of these jumping genes, if you go back long enough, they were also retroviruses, but they don't look like retroviruses anymore because they've been inside the genome for so long. So this is the way I'm sorry. This is the way that the genome has become built up. And so a virus is not a negative thing, right? It can be a positive thing, it can be a negative thing. Now we come to the immune system. Baba, Sri Sri Anandamurtiji says that negative microvita will die a natural death after their natural lifespan. In order to kill negative microvita before the end of their lifespan, the number of positive microvita has to be increased by good thinking and sadhana. Only by increasing the number of positive microvita is the unnatural death of a negative microvita possible. The disease is caused by the negative microvita, and when people take allopathic medicine to cure disease, the medicine disturbs the ecological balance of the body, and because of this, more negative microvita gets concentrated at the point of the disease. Allopathic medicines do not kill the disease. Diseases die by their own natural death. Although the medicine may check the disease, that is, the medicine may check the symptoms of the disease, or the medicine may limit the destructive effect of the disease. Certain diseases maybe deteriorate certain tissues. Right? So medicines can have a beneficial role. So they may check the disease. The increased concentration of negative microvita can overcome the effect of the medicine. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Right? The medicine may make it so the disease isn't so harmful and give the positive microvita more time to kill the negative microvita. However, because medicines in the end, they're toxins, right? They may increase the negative microvita and have a negative effect and make it even worse. So in fact, the increased concentration of negative microvita caused by allopathic medicines is creating many new types of diseases. And due to this, 2 or 3 new diseases are presently being created every decade. Right? So the immune system is the objective manifestation of the battle between the positive and negative microvita. Baba says that during the First World War, the decaying bodies of the dead soldiers attracted negative microvita from the stars, and thus the influenza disease originated. This influenza disease was incredibly deadly. It killed, I forget the exact, I can check it here. Yeah, called the Spanish flu. It infected 500 million people, about 30% of the global population at that time. You can imagine if 30% of the world being infected, right? That would mean in USA alone, there'd be 100 million cases of coronavirus. That's how widespread this was. It killed between 50 and 100 million people, right? That means it killed 10% of the global population. It is estimated that if the influenza virus, such a deadly virus, was to come to Earth today, it would kill a minimum of 250 million people. So this influenza virus was microvita that were attracted by the decaying bodies of dead soldiers after the First World War. But the interesting thing is that the influenza virus started before the First World War ended. Now, it says it came from distant stars. The nearest star is 5 light years away, right? And other stars are hundreds of light years away or millions of light years away. So if these microvita were coming from very far away, but the influenza virus was very soon, like actually started even before the First World War finished. So they didn't have time to move at slow speeds. These microvita had to move beyond the speed of light to get here very quickly so that they could infect the global population. But this sentence reminds us, of a lot of people, what I want to say, they were predicting that the coronavirus was started by the killing of animals, right? But it wouldn't be the case that we got this disease from the animals. It'd be the case that by the killing of the animals, we attracted negative microvita, right? And they manifested as the coronavirus. So the root cause could have been the rampant killing of animals on this planet, right? But it's not that, we can specifically point, oh, this meat farm in China was the reason. No, they were not the only ones killing Microvita, right? Or killing the animals. Okay. Now we come to some more interesting things. It is quite often observed that a child suffers from some disease without any apparent fault on her part. The disease is attributed to her being affected by the germs of that disease, and thus germs appear to be the cause. In fact, the samskaras of that child give rise to the samvedana, or psychic action, which then activates the germs of that particular disease in the body. So here we see a sequence. Samskara leads to samvedana, leads to germs, leads to disease. Well, there's a few steps in this process. The first step, samskara being converted into samvedana. Samskara is a seed, a latent seed. It remains unexpressed until the appropriate conditions are there to awaken and germinate that samskara. That could be a specific point in the lifetime of that person. It could be the environment. When that latent samskara becomes active, then it's converted into samvedana. Right? Samvedana is a psychic action, not a psychic action by your conscious mind. It's a psychic action by your unconscious will. The way you have two forces of will inside of you, a conscious will and an unconscious will. Baba uses the word the direct will and the indirect will. The direct will is what you usually think of as your willpower, right? I want to do this. I want to give a talk on Zoom. I want to go eat some candy. That's your direct will. You use it to maneuver yourself through the life. Animals don't have a direct will. Only human beings have a direct will. Right? Animals are guided by the cosmic mind. So because we have a direct will, we can do what we want. We can accelerate on the path quickly, or we can move in the opposite direction. Every life form has an indirect will. An indirect will is the expression of the desire of the cosmic mind to neutralize all the samskaras. So inside of you have indirect will. And what the indirect will wants to do is neutralize samskaras. It wants to free you of your samskaras. Because of your indirect will, that's why you're born. That's why your heart is beating. That's why you continue to breathe. The moment your indirect will say, this is not an effective medium. This body is not an effective medium. This life situation is not an effective medium for the expression of the samskaras, then you will die. You will take on a different structure. So that's the indirect will. It's trying to create situations for the manifestation of samskaras in your life. It's working behind the scenes. You're not aware of it. So every life form has an indirect will. Only human beings have a direct will. So samskara became samvedana. That means that samskara has become the psychic object of the indirect will. The indirect will now says, I'm trying to express this samskara. Then it becomes active, and the indirect will somehow create a situation for the expression of that samskara. It could be you crash your car. It could be you get sick. Right? It depends on the nature of the samskara. Microvita are involved in this conversion. When we talk about samskara, they're in the mind, but what is the mind? The mind is a bunch of ectoplasms. These ectoplasms, they have a certain momentum to them, a certain memory. The samskara is stored there in these ectoplasms, but it's latent. Right? How does the environment stimulate those ectoplasms so that samskara becomes active? Here, microvita is involved. Right? Microvita control the movement of ectoplasms. They give the ectoplasms a different structure. Then the next, sorry. We talk about the next step, samvedana becoming germs. This is something very interesting, right? Because we know that samskara is related to my own DNA, right? No, so you could almost say that DNA is the physical manifestation of my samskara. But here we're saying that these samskaras are altering the DNA of a bacteria or of a virus, where they're attracting some other species. But so these, when the Samvedana is becoming germs, it's creating the disease, that's definitely the process of crude microvita, crude negative microvita. These crude negative microvita are attracted by your indirect will. Microvita, however, cannot create a bacteria out of thin air. They can create a virus. They can manifest as a virus, but they cannot create a bacteria. So how does it work? There are a few options here. There could be some neutral bacteria or some friendly bacteria, which your body is full of. Actually, you have more bacteria in your body than you have human cells with your own DNA. When you die, those neutral bacteria, they become inimical bacteria. They start to decompose your body for you because they become infused with negative microvita. So we know that bacteria can be transformed into negative microvita by the activity of awakened microvita. Another way this can happen, the disease-causing bacteria were already present in the body. You have many disease-causing bacteria in you and on you all the time. However, if your immune system is strong, if you have sufficient quantity of positive microvita, these are kept in check. A very common example is the fever blister that forms on your lips. That's a virus, and you always have it. It's always there, but it can't express itself. The reason it's called a fever blister is because when you get sick, then your immune system is weakened. Your positive microvita are busy combating that sickness. Therefore, the positive microvita that are always keeping in check that fever blister, they become unable to do so. And you get a little bump on your lip, right? And it lasts a little while. And there's nothing you can do to speed up the process, how fast it'll go away. You can put some medicines on it so that, it doesn't bleed so much, or doesn't get so big, but it's going to take its time and until the positive microvita can kill it. The third possibility, this Samvedana attracts negative microvita, which awaken and take the form of disease. This is the case if you get a viral infection. It is conceivably the case that awakened negative microvita could alter a bacteria. Okay, so I actually, Didi, I'm not aware when I have to stop talking.
Yeah, actually the time is almost finished. Maybe if actually the lecture is a very interesting, and so many people are really interested in listening more, but our time is running a little bit late.
So
Maybe
give me a number, Didi. 10
uh,
minutes. What?
5 minutes. Is that
10.
possible?
Okay.
We have in the last part will be the question and answer for the panel discussion, and you can may explain something more during that time.
I'll go quickly.
Thank you.
Um, I don't know if 5 minutes will get there, but we'll try. All right, so your immune system has an innate immune system and an adaptive immune system. Every life form has an innate immune system. Only advanced life forms have an adaptive immune system. Remember, I said that the immune system is the manifestation of the battle, is the positive microvita that are engaged in combating the negative microvita, and they manifest themselves through the immune system. Your innate immune system has a lot of physical barriers, like your skin, and there's the oils and the earwax and the saliva and the digestive fluids and the inflammation process when you cut yourself or get sick or get a headache. The innate immune system is also able to recognize invading microorganisms, right? Using something called pattern recognition receptors, PRR. They recognize molecules and things that are on microbes but aren't on human cells. Now, the innate immune system cannot adapt to something. It just does what it does. So these PRRs, they recognize certain microbes, they don't recognize other ones. And the innate immune system cannot learn within one lifespan to recognize something, but they are still positive microvita. And in the next generation, the innate immune system can become better at recognizing different kinds of viruses. So if you live in a certain environment where there's a certain kind of disease, at first, maybe your innate immune system can't recognize it, but over time it can. It can learn. And we'll talk about how that can happen if we have time. Um, and so then in the future generations, your innate immune system would be able to attack that. The benefit of the innate immune system is it's very fast. It's already there, ready to attack things that happen. And the innate immune system is killing the lion's share of potential disease that's coming to us. Next, you have the adaptive immune system. This is only in more advanced species. It has T cells and B cells, lymph glands, and it creates a memory. So your adaptive immune system is how your body can learn to fight a disease it didn't know how to fight before. And in the case of a coronavirus or some other disease, this is what's happening. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but basically, there's certain cells devour disease. They find the invading disease. They bring it to the lymph gland. The lymph gland will take an immature T cell and teach it to recognize this disease. And then that T cell can become a memory T cell, which your body will keep inside just in case that disease comes again. Now it's ready for it. Or it will become a cytotoxic T cell, which goes around and basically has poison. Any cell that's invaded, it will go kill it to kill that disease. Then there's the B cell. Now the B cells are the really powerful ones. A T cell can't attack the virus directly. It can only attack a cell that's been invaded by the virus to prevent the virus from reproducing. But a B cell can attack the virus even when it's not inside of another cell, when it's just floating through the environment. And so these are the things we call antibodies. B cells become plasma cells. Plasma cells produce antibodies. An antibody has this Y shape, and on the ends of it are called antigen binding sites. They bind to the virus, and there's different kinds of this blue region that you see. It can take on different forms according to what they want to do, right? But this antigen binding site, that has to be genetically engineered specifically for each disease. And that's what happens in the lymph glands. It's called somatic hypermutation. Somatic hypermutation is a process of genetic engineering done in response to any virus and many bacteria that invade invade your body. And so something called a macrophage brings a dead virus to the lymph node. Then they do this process of genetically engineering until they create a B cell that can produce an antibody that specifically kills that virus, specifically for that virus. And it's amazing to understand. Science doesn't understand it very well. They can't explain it because they don't understand what is a microvita. But when you look at what's happening from the perspective of microvita theory, it's very clear that this is something very similar to the process of evolution, where awakened microvita are taking on new forms to learn how to fight that virus. And so this is the positive microvita learning how to defeat the negative microvita, right? It's the negative microvita have the DNA that's certain information as to how to attack us. The positive microvita are getting information how to defeat that. This ability of microvita to carry information, well, that's the basis of homeopathy. But another way it works is this: you all know that if you have coronavirus and you recover, they can take your blood and take the plasma from your blood. They can inject it into a sick person. And that blood plasma will help that person recover from the coronavirus infection. But why? Yes, that blood plasma has antibodies in it, but it's just a little bit of blood plasma, right? It doesn't that person's body still doesn't know how to produce the B cells. They're going to make those antibodies. So why is it useful? Because it's the information there. Right? You're not just giving the antibodies, you're giving the informational content of those positive microvita, which are contained in the B cells, which have already gone through this process of genetic engineering to produce that specific antibody that will fight coronavirus. And this is the way vaccines are effective. This is the hidden secret behind a vaccine. This is the hidden secret behind transfusions of blood plasma. All right, Didi, I think I'll stop, okay? I had a few more things to say, Baba's recommendations for fighting a virus, but we can talk about that in the question and answer part. And
Okay.
okay, thank you.